Thank you so much, Mike. Welcome, everyone. As you guys know, this is our final webinar in the course Fundraising for Collections Care. We've got a fantastic final webinar planned for you today, focused on creating fundraising approaches. It looks like right now we've got about 105 people logged into this meeting room, and it's so great to see so many familiar names in that chat box. As Mike said, please feel free to keep saying hello in the chat box, and throughout this webinar, please feel free to post your questions there as well, and we'll try to get to them by the close of today's webinar. As you know, this is just one course in our series, Caring for Yesterday's Treasures Today. 5 courses have already been archived on the online community, and you're more than welcome to go view those at any time. We owe a great debt to the Laura Bush 21st Century Librarian Grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services that's made this course and the entire series possible. And we're also fortunate to have Learning Times and Mike on board to help us with both website and webinar support. So if you can believe it, today is our final webinar. And thank you to everyone who's been following us over the past couple weeks who've been logging in live or watching us through the recordings. It's so great to see you all. Like our other courses, you're more than welcome to earn a certificate of completion and also a digital credential from credly.com. To do so, we just ask for a few things. The first is that you've registered so that we can actually send you emails. We also ask that you watch all 5 webinars in the course, whether it's live or through the recordings. And finally, we ask that you complete all 5 homework assignments. All assignments are due 1 week from today on Monday, October 14th. And while you do have a full week, we do know that the deadline is Columbus Day and also the Canadian Thanksgiving. So just shoot us an email if you think you won't be able to turn it in by Monday. So as of this morning, about 83 people had completed the homework assignment for our last webinar with Barbara, and this was definitely an in-depth assignment, and I really do appreciate everyone taking the time to answer those questions. It really would be nearly impossible for me to make any type of sweeping summary based on your responses. Uh, the outcomes you listed were very diverse. The timelines range from 1 month to 3 years, but it is really apparent that everyone has given a great deal of thought to their projects and how to fund those projects. So for that, I hope you don't think it's too cheesy, but an A+ to everyone. And we do hope that doing some of the legwork on those homework assignments will help you with your next step of actually applying for a grant or proposing some fundraising. So the final homework assignment for this course, which I'll link to at the end of this webinar, is actually the course evaluation, so no more fundraising questions, just questions about how you like the course. And I will note at the end of that evaluation, you'll see a link to an anonymous survey. So if you'd like to provide feedback to us privately, you're more than welcome to do so. And if you weren't interested in earning a certificate, which means you weren't filling out those homework assignments, we'd love it if you could still go ahead and fill out this last one. We'd love to hear your feedback on the course. So the course homepage will remain up and continue to hold all of these presentations, all these resources and transcripts. And after your homework has been turned in, we'll go ahead and take all the homework links down and we will replace them with links to the webinar recordings. So you can go back, watch them at your own pace, or share them with colleagues and friends. So after today, what is next? So shortly following this webinar, we'll send all our registered participants a link to the webinar recordings and a link to all the homework assignments so you have everything in one place. Again, all materials are due by Monday, October 14th, which is 1 week from today. Shortly following that deadline, we'll go ahead and pull down all those links to the homework assignments and replace them with the webinar recordings, and then staff at Heritage Preservation will start the process of logging all your homework assignments and tracking attendance. And once we have that logged, it usually takes us about a week, but don't hold me to that. We'll do our best. But once we have that all logged, we'll send out an email to everyone who has earned a certificate of completion just to let you know that your certificate is in the mail, and we'll also give you some more information about that online credential. And then you'll get one more email from Credly about how to accept your credential. And then that's kind of it. You guys are more than welcome, if you haven't done so already, consider signing up to become a member of the online community. Membership is, of course, free and does give you access to post to the discussion board to keep these conversations going. And also consider signing up for one of our last 2 courses in this series. Our next one is Care of Audio-Visual Materials, and registration does close on Wednesday. As always, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to call or email us. And with that said, let's move on to our topic. So I'm so pleased to introduce to you all Lee Price. Lee is the Director of Development at the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts. In his role, Lee is not only responsible for raising money for the center, but he's also responsible for assisting cultural institutions with developing fundraising strategies for preservation and conservation projects. Currently, he is assisting with the organization of 10 crowdfunding campaigns through Pennsylvania's top 10 endangered artifacts. And on personal time, Lee manages 2 blogs, Tour America's Treasures, for which he is conducting a multi-year site-by-site introduction to all 1,200 Save America's Treasure sites, and also the blog 21 Essays, which takes all cultural history as its subject. In addition, Lee has participated in 2 blogathons that raised over $25,000 for film preservation projects. So we are in fantastic hands today. Lee, I'm going to move this out of the way, and then I will hand things over to you.
Thanks, Jenny. Well, greetings from Philadelphia. It's getting darker out by the moment, so I think all the bad weather that our folks, the people who are listening in central Pennsylvania, and Washington, it's all rolling toward me, so Mike might have his hands full as he's dealing with the sound of thunderclaps in the background. I'm just hoping they punctuate at the appropriate times. Well, welcome to Outside the Box, Creative Fundraising Approaches. This is the last of the series of Fundraising for Collections Care webinars. Not really a climax. I sort of approach this more as an appendix to the rest of the series because the material I'm presenting goes off in a different direction than the other 4 webinars. So you basically had 4 inside the box webinars, and this is the outside the box webinar to finish. And before we begin, I just wanted to note that the PowerPoint slides for this webinar, or at least most of the PowerPoint slides for this webinar, are available for downloading at the Heritage Preservation site on the page where you registered. But if you've printed them out and are following along, I didn't want there to be any confusion, but there are some deviations from the print version with what I'll be putting up on the screen. Because basically I took out some background slides that I use while telling stories, and I didn't want to give away the punchline. It would be basically like a stand-up comedian giving out the transcripts before the act. So I don't want to do that. In all cases, the essential text in the handouts is the same, so you can go back and look at it later, and it's fine. But if you're following along and following the handout, you could get a little confused. In general, better to watch the screen than the handout, and I apologize for any inconvenience with that. Today, we'll tentatively, gingerly explore the scary world outside the box. But I want to start inside, and relative safety inside the box, just to make clear the difference between what fundraising is like inside the box, what it's like outside the box. Well, published back in December 2005, Heritage Preservation's Heritage Health Index report contained one of my favorite quotes of all time. I've been leading off workshops with this quote for 8 years now, ever since this was published. It's a statement of why we do our work. And in my opinion, you really can't fundraise effectively unless you understand why you're fundraising. So this is the quote that I think should be framed and hung in the room where your board of directors meet to serve as a constant reminder that providing a safe environment and proper care for collections is a fundamental responsibility of all institutions and individuals who care about our heritage. And this means that if your organization has accepted the responsibility of caring for collections, you'd better do the job. And it's a job that requires thoughtful planning, lots of time, and the reason we have this series of webinars, it requires money. As a board member or a staff member, you have a responsibility. No, make that, you have a fundamental responsibility to invest in all three areas, to invest in planning, to invest in time, and to invest in raising the needed money for collections care. So there are all these different ways of doing that. You can raise money in the box, and that's what's been discussed here over the last 2 weeks, over the last 4 webinar sessions by Kelsey, Susan, and Barbara. But just as a recap, just to let you know what I think thinking inside the box is about. This is my chart that I've been using for the past 12 years. And it remains what I still strongly advocate for in-the-box thinking when it comes to collections care. It depicts a process of how to move forward as a collecting institution, thoughtfully and strategically improving your collections care program. It's what you raise money for when you're raising money for collections care. These are the areas that you raise money for. To read the chart, you start at the top and work your way down to the bottom. So in the beginning, you need to address inventory. You need to know what you've got and where it's at. And you need to have a plan to protect your collections in case of disaster. You need your disaster plan to address what to do when the pipe breaks and the room starts to flood. You invest in some sort of overall assessment of your environment, ideally done by an outsider, almost if you want it to be taken seriously, done by an outside consultant, a professional outside consultant, of your environment and collections care strategies. I think there was a question about this in the last webinar. Well, what are these surveys? These are the surveys mentioned by Barbara Lilly, where she said you should have, well, they could be a CAP report, a collections assessment program report. That's a program that's administered by our host, Heritage Preservation. Or sometimes they're called preservation needs assessments, or anything of the equivalent. But they're addressing the various collections care strategies that your institution is currently using, and they're addressing the environment where your collections are stored and exhibited. Then you use the findings from that report to feed into your subsequent fundraising. And the two areas that you really should use first are for collections care management, investing in higher level cataloging, the development of finding aids, the development of written collections management policies, that type of thing. That's the management side, and also the environment, environmental monitoring equipment, and the training and how to use it. And often big ticket items, like say a new HVAC system, that all falls under the environment. But you really can't effectively fundraise for the HVAC system until you have that assessment that says you need it, and then you can quote from the assessment in your grant request for the environmental improvement. This is all left brain fundraising that's being presented here. So you work your way down, you're very conscientiously and strategically working your way through the chart, and only at the bottom do you reach what I really consider the sexy areas of collections care, where you get to do the digitization and the conservation treatment. And that's what so many people just want to jump straight down to. They want to do the fun stuff early, first. But especially the higher level funders, they don't want you doing the treatment until you're addressing the environment, until you're making sure that the material that's treated is going back into an optimal environment where everything is going to not run into the problems that it may have run into in the past, where it's going to be preserved for a long time. So they want to, basically the higher level funders, and that's what we'll be looking at very briefly here, the major funders that have been covered I think Barbara Lilly went over this some, the major funders, the federal funders, are interested in helping you work through this process. And these are the primary sites you'd go for using this type of a model. You look for government funding, foundation grants, and since these grants often require a one-to-one match, they're great for launching the project, but then you have to go and look toward, well, the usual suspects, the major donor gifts, corporate contributions, individual appeals, special events to raise the match. And this process is great. This is what I usually present on, and it's fully deserving of 4 or more webinar sessions like you've been listening to and watching over the past couple of weeks. This system, it's what I love, and it's what I usually go out there and I preach this system. Follow it, it makes sense. It is, what have I got? It is logical, sequential, rational, analytical. This is left brain thinking. And then what I'm presenting here is that left brain thinking is inside the box thinking. And that's what I wanted to present here before I move to the outside the box thinking. I want to define what the inside the box thinking is, because there's a complement to all this. And that's the way that the other side of the brain thinks. That's our random and intuitive, our holistic, our synthesizing side, and it's the messier side too. It's the emotional side. That's the right brain thinking, and it's where we begin to think outside the box. Now, both ways of thinking are important, and in our wrap-up today, at the conclusion, I want to start the process of trying to figure out maybe a new model for whole brain fundraising. So there's my image of our whole brain fundraising, encompassing both the left and the right, and borrowing an image here from, I always have to get in some old movie references. This is from The Brain from Planet Arris from 1957. So that's my second favorite of the flying brain movies of the 1950s, and my model for where we should be heading towards the flying whole brain thinking approach. Now, I think Susan Susan was the second webinar. Susan, I think, obliquely referred at least to this left brain, right brain dichotomy in her webinar. She didn't call it that, but I think she made a reference to it where I think when she used the terms strategic and responsive, she was kind of thinking about this, this dichotomy going on here, with the implication being strategic equals good, and responsive, the opposite of good, not so good, maybe even bad. And I understand that because that's what I have been preaching myself for a long time, that, well, think strategically. Always think strategically because that's what the federal funders want to see. I understand this type of thinking completely, and I understand where she's coming from. My default setting is definitely on strategic left brain thinking. I think a lot of people in the collections field tend to default to this type of thinking. It's like the water we swim in, like we're the fish in the water. We look around and, to paraphrase David Foster Wallace, we see water. But there is more. There is this right brain approach. So I'm afraid that we may have to accept that the best of all possible world systems for us left brain people, and that best of all possible world systems is the one we've been living in for the past 20 or so years, thanks to the wonderful peer review grant processes that have been perfected by the Institute of Museum and Library Services, IMLS, the National Endowment for the Humanities. They all use these great peer review grant processes that have encouraged this type of left brain thinking. And now here we're suddenly seeing those types of systems on the decline. And we are having to confront this new world where there are emerging funding strategies that could potentially start filling in a little of the gaps that are left, or maybe even a lot of the gaps. There could be quite a bit of money out there, but these are new strategies that, for better or worse, tend to be more right-brained in the way we have to approach them and to raise money for them. A lot of them are digital strategies, opportunities to persuade people to give online. And if we want to tap into these, the way we approach fundraising, if we really have been approaching it very much from a left brain side, if we're doing that, well, it just has to change. We have to adapt to this new environment to survive. So the things that I'm looking at today are what I would consider to be right-brained fundraising activities. At the top, I've got crowdfunding. That's the big exciting one at the moment that quite a few people are talking about. Sometimes it's called micro-fundraising. Sometimes people refer to it as crowdsourcing. I'm not too comfortable calling it crowdsourcing. Crowdfunding is a small subset of crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing is any type of gathering information from through the internet. It's not just the raising of money. So I like micro-fundraising and crowdfunding are about raising money. So I generally, in this case, I'm calling it crowdfunding throughout. And crowdfunding is probably best known through the great success that Kickstarter has been enjoying, the fundraising platform Kickstarter. Then we have something that I've had a lot of fun with, and that's raising funding through blogathons. Blogathons aren't necessarily for fundraising. Lots of times it's just fans who get together to discuss a subject that on multiple blogs that they happen to enjoy. But every now and then they decide to enlist all their readers to raise money for a service. And the big difference between crowdfunding and blogathon fundraising is crowdfunding is done by the institution, where in blogathon fundraising, your fans are raising the money for you and giving you a gift. Then we have internet competitions, which are popularity contests in essence, where corporations pit nonprofit against nonprofit. We have the website-centered fundraising with tabs and buttons that say "Give here." You go to the main website, and it just says "Give here." There was a question earlier about that, and in the very first webinar, there was a question about that, and that's just a subject that I definitely look forward to addressing. There's mobile giving, which is increasing exponentially. And that's where you're giving directly from your smartphone while you're on site, or maybe on your commute home, where you just toss off $10 to $100 to an organization. Very spontaneous, this type of giving. Underneath that, I've got a few non-digital ideas that I'm tossing in because they do seem to be, to me, they seem more right-brain in nature. And that's the adopt an object programs. They have been around for quite a while, but I still thought I'd bring them up because nobody had discussed them yet, and I love them. I think they're fantastic programs. Programs for adopting a book, an artifact, a painting. They really give a donor ownership, which is it gives them complete buy-in to the idea here. So we'll look at a couple of adopt an object ideas. Creative promotional sponsorships, especially effective in trying to raise those matches when you do get grants. And last of all, I did want to mention some new ideas for more intimate special events as opposed to the big party under the canvas tent special events that have largely become the norm in the special event world. There have been some very interesting much more low-key special events that sometimes seem to be as effective in raising money as the big events. So these are the strategies that we'll be discussing for the next hour. And so, I imagine questions there. I haven't been following the questions really, but I imagine questions will be coming in about these specific subjects, and I plan on answering those questions probably down a little bit further. But that's basically the end of my theoretical introduction. And Jenny, are there any questions I should tackle before diving deep into this?
No, we don't have any current questions, but folks, feel free to write in any questions over there in that chat box, and we'll get to them in breaks.
Okay, well, I will express my disappointment here because I left a question hanging that I'll just answer myself. So I think the natural question would be when I say something is my second favorite Flying Brains movie, it should be the question is, well, what is your first? So my first, and that would be Fiend Without a Face. So that is the classic of the Flying Brains movies. Brain from Planet Arris is just a little bit too much like a large balloon floating in the air. Nevertheless, pretty nice, effective picture for my whole brain approach. The ones from Fiends Without a Face are just too ugly. They wouldn't work in this type of approach. So let's be moving on. The reason that I classify all of these as right brain fundraising is because this whole model that I have here, starting at the top of inventory and working down, basically gets tossed out with these right brain approaches. And I'm very attached to this model. I've been following it for a long time, but all of a sudden with the right brain fundraising, if you want the brains of your potential donors, that's the brain theme going here. If you want the brains of your potential donors to start pumping all the happiness neurochemicals, to start pumping the endorphins and the dopamine and the serotonin and all the things that make people add an extra zero to the check, you need to jump down to the sexier areas. And that puts us down here at the bottom of the chart, which is where I've been telling people not to start. But when you're doing this type of fundraising, it is where you start. You don't go to Kickstarter to raise funding for the higher level cataloging. It just isn't going to excite the interest. So what you want is something sexier, and probably my definition of sexy isn't exactly everybody's, but I think it's with enough people that that we can raise plenty of money from people who share some similar interests. So what I think was effective is something like this. So Jenny, we have the Save the Wig, the movie of Save the Wig.
Yeah, let me pull that over.
Thaddeus Stevens really believed in merit, that people should be acknowledged based on their merit, that they should be promoted based on their merit, that they should have opportunities regardless of where they came from or who their parents were or what they looked like.
With the recent movie Lincoln, people are today probably more familiar with Stevens than they have been at any time in recent history. And they start to see through that movie the kind of influence that he had in the legislature. In fact, while he was in Congress representing Lancaster County, he was probably the most powerful legislator there.
The 14th Amendment's ramifications are incredible in the way of freedom for the people in the United States. And imagine today he would consider that one of his most important accomplishments.
We could compare him to a Martin Luther King, Frederick Douglass, people who stood out for justice, people who had a real mission to make a change in people's lives.
Thaddeus Stevens was always rumored to have been involved with the Underground Railroad. That is, providing some method of support for freedom seekers leaving enslavement in the South to come into Pennsylvania and other northern states and head to Canada.
I hope when the Stevens project is completed downtown at the Convention Center, in conjunction with the work that the Historical Society is always doing to promote Thaddeus Stevens as well as James Buchanan, I hope that that will help resurrect his image. He's never going to be a likable person. He wasn't then, he isn't now. He was a vituperative man, especially in his old age. But he was right, and he did change America.
It can be a very good lesson for people to learn when they come here in years ahead and see the life that he led and the things that he left behind. It is something can't be hardly any more personal than that. So we must save the wig.
As the mayor of the city of Lancaster, I implore you, save the wig.
Remember, we must save the wig.
Save wig.
Please save the wig.
Save the wig.
Well, welcome to the world of crowdfunding, where we can save the wig, where internet campaigns are developed on special fundraising platforms. This particular one, the Save the Thaddeus Stevens Wig campaign, is taking place at my workplace as part of our Pennsylvania's Top 10 Endangered Artifacts campaign. For 42 days, we have 10 top-notch Pennsylvania organizations vying to raise funding and support for special projects. Did I just go? I just went backwards or something on the screen here. Whoa, I went way back. Any idea what happened there, Jenny?
No, no idea. Let's see, can you?
I'll just move rapidly
There you
forward
go.
here. I probably pressed the wrong button. Okay, well, there's my PA Top 10. For 42 days, we have 10 Pennsylvania organizations, and they're vying to raise funding and support for special projects, each of them focused on conservation. And it's sort of my, well, I'm, as a designer of this campaign, one of our designers here of this campaign, I'm looking at this as my own private little laboratory for finding out what works and what didn't with 10 different projects, 10 different institutions, all trying different ways of raising money, learning what works and what doesn't, which makes it just an absolutely fascinating little experiment in crowdfunding. My hope is that all 10 of these artifacts are completely successful in their crowdfunding through this. In other words, I'm looking at this less as a competition and more as just really hoping that everybody's a winner at the end of this. So if you do want to take a closer look at this, and of course I encourage you to because I'm having so much fun with it, that's PA Top 10 Artifacts, as it says there, PA Top 10 Artifacts.org. And that's my plug for my current little project here. We built this page on the model of Kickstarter, the world's leading crowdfunding platform. And Kickstarter's gotten a lot of great press. People saying it's better than NEA, and it's gotten, other people trying to pull us back to reality and say, well, no, it isn't going to be the savior of nonprofits either, and it won't be. It's useful for some things and not for others, just like most fundraising strategies are. Nevertheless, the successes of crowdfunding over the past couple of years have been very impressive. Kickstarter is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. It's not necessarily the best place for you, though, as a nonprofit. It's designed more for individuals and small businesses than for nonprofits. They're a little inconvenient. You can work with them, but they're a little inconvenient for ensuring tax incentives for charitable giving. And they operate on an all-or-nothing model. And that isn't necessarily attractive to fundraising people like me who don't necessarily want to get involved in a project if there's a chance that we'll get nothing out of it. You see, if your Kickstarter goal is to raise $5,000 in 3 weeks, and at the end of 3 weeks you've raised $4,000, then you don't get anything. And that's a great system for encouraging urgency and getting those last-minute contributions in, but you really run the risk that you've put in a lot of work for nothing at the end, and you don't want to get in that position when you're a nonprofit that's strapped for time. You want some. You want to take. You want the opportunity to take the 4,000. Well, Kickstarter turned out to be a pretty easy model to imitate, and so the field has gotten rather crowded with other startup platforms in the past year, each of them tweaking the Kickstarter model to appeal to a different audience, looking to fill the business gaps. And so we've had, what have we had? We've had Indiegogo has been very successful with appealing to nonprofits. They've really made it much more straightforward than Kickstarter is for nonprofits to use. And now there's CrowdRise. George Eastman House has just completed a successful effort, I think it was this past weekend, to raise $2,500 in a day. $2,500 in a day was their goal, and they exceeded their goal by $600. I think they still have it up. I think they're hoping more money will still trickle in if you want to go to CrowdRise and do a search for George Eastman House. You can still give them, you can put them up over $3,500 if you get in now. And there are lots of other platforms. I just have a couple of them up here. I have CrowdTilt. That's a new one that people are starting to use. The Knight Foundation entered the crowdfunding fray with its geography-based Power to Give site, their platforms, and they put these just in the regions that have Knight newspapers, operating on the premise that all fundraising, like all politics, all fundraising is local. But there are other premises for crowdfunding as well. There's Rocket Hub, which is for academic projects. And now there's Petri Dish, which I'm quite interested in. Petri Dish is primarily being developed for science projects, but I know we had some people on here in the past webinar sessions inquiring about archaeology. Petri Dish has an archaeology tab to set up. I think I mentioned it's in beta mode. It's currently in beta mode, so they don't have that many projects up yet. But they might be looking for an interesting archaeology project if you're interested in trying some crowdfunding. I'm not absolutely convinced that it makes all that much difference which platform you go on. I think a lot of people have thought, well, if they put it on Kickstarter, it'll be going in front of a lot of potential venture capitalists who'll see it and will automatically decide that this place that they've never had any relationship with previously, they'll just be inspired and they'll give you thousands of dollars. I don't know if that's really quite how this works. Most of this works through disseminating through social media communities. And because of that, because the emphasis really falls more on who knows whom among your friends, I don't know if the location of the platform makes all that much difference in choosing which platform you should use. In other words, a small new platform like CrowdRise that George Eastman House decided to use, I don't think they'd be at that much of a disadvantage over using Kickstarter, which does get more traffic and also has vastly more projects to choose from. And last of all, I put down us. We did it by developing our own site. But lots of other places are thinking about, well, maybe we should just put up our crowdfunding on our own website as well. And if you're an organization and you have a website, which most do, that you just do the crowdfunding directly off your website. And that doesn't seem to be a bad idea. So I have a story about an organization here that just did that recently, and that would be the Freer and Sackler Galleries of the Smithsonian Institution. Back in June, Freer Sackler launched a campaign to raise funding for their upcoming exhibition, Yoga, the Art of Transformation. Just a one-month campaign. They set aside the month of June to raise a very ambitious goal of $125,000. Offering yoga fans, of course, the opportunity to make yoga history. And here's the ask, the Donate Now button, where you get to, for $25 you achieve serenity, which isn't a bad thing. You can go for serenity, power, bliss, transformation, flight, all depending on your giving level. And the yoga fans, there were a lot of us in the cultural community watching this closely to see if the Smithsonian Institution was going to pull this one off or not, because the size of an institution doesn't guarantee anything about their success in being able to do this type of thing. So, they put this up, and you just wonder, are they going to fall on their face? Are they going to succeed or what? And the yoga fans really responded. They did well. The Smithsonian made their goal of 125,000, and then they just blew right past it and ultimately raised $176,415 on their platform. Has to be considered a blowout success for the Smithsonian. I don't know personally how the Smithsonian did it. I have a feeling they did have some backdoors. I have a feeling they were working the people they knew, the higher level donors, major donors and like that. They were working them personally through avenues besides the crowdfunding. But nevertheless, crowdfunding was a huge part of this, and it's given us yet another model for an institution that obviously did it right because it's been so successful. Now, to succeed with this type of platform, you have the whole thing is about driving audiences to these donate buttons. And you have to drive audiences through social media promotion primarily, because coverage in newspapers, I was once involved in a campaign on the internet that got a mention in the New York Times. And it was a New York Times editorial, and lots of people read New York Times editorials, so that was a wonderful mention to get. But they didn't give the URL. And if you don't have the URL mentioned in print, it really isn't that helpful. It's hard enough to get the person moving from the newspaper to the computer to enter the URL, much less to remember to go to the computer, to Google, to find where you're going to give money. You just want this to be as easy as possible. So you always want coverage to be on internet sources so that people can just do the one click, as little clicking as possible to get to the place where they can give. For this campaign, for Sackler, they targeted, there were 20.4 million yoga practitioners, they figured, in the U.S., and so that's the communities that they were going for, type of lifestyle activity, all the type of yoga and other lifestyle activity communities on the internet that they could go to, approaching them through Facebook, approaching them through emails, just trying to get the word out to millions of people in order to get I think in the end they got around 750 contributors in order to make up the total amount that they raised. The main driver is the website, of course, that everybody loves to hate, and that's Facebook, founded in 2004. And the world is really different today because of it. It's been hugely influential, and I don't think you can do this type of campaign without putting Facebook right in the middle of your promotional strategy. Second best driver is Twitter. Oh my God. Second best driver is Twitter, and you do have to master, in this whole thing, you're probably going to eventually have to master video, because especially with the sites like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, a 2 to 3 minute video is, well, on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, it's essential. You need them on there. They put them up at the top of the pages. It's just part of the model, and it is kind of expected now. Not always used. Actually, I've seen some places on other sites that have been successful in not using video. So some use it and some don't, but generally it's becoming more and more the norm to use video in your crowdfunding. Another case study, one of the more exciting ones, and I have to apologize in advance here because I think we may have staff from Thomas Edison Birthplace Museum, probably have some other Edison sites too because there are quite a few of them, and I have to apologize in advance. Thomas Edison is our villain in this particular case study. It's just the way things happen to fall. Competition is very helpful in this type of thing as well because it is so emotional. And so we need our villains. And so Thomas Edison fits the bill here because over in the other corner we have our dashing hero. That would be Nikola Tesla, the inventor of AC current. So we have the proponent, the great proponent of direct current, Thomas Edison, and the inventor of AC current. And Tesla has just become very popular of late. He's my son's hero, so he was very much on my radar when I started learning about this whole thing. And here's why Tesla is my son's hero. Well, there he is. He was the greatest geek who ever lived. And, you know, my son's not alone with this at all. The Tesla geeks of America are legion. And they, you know, with apologies to the Birthplace Museum, yeah, they're not big fans of Edison. They have a very vocal set of Tesla fans out there in the world, waiting to be tapped into. So in 2009, the site of a major historic Tesla lab. Let's see what I did wrong here. Jenny, I seem to have a problem.
I think maybe...
Did I press the back button? Okay.
No, just one more click.
Here we go. Okay. In 2009, the site of a major historic Tesla lab located on a 16-acre property on Long Island went on the real estate market. And they were asking $1.7 million for this 16-acre property. The Friends of Science East, that was a nonprofit organization out on Long Island. They had wanted to build a Tesla museum since 1996. For 13 years, they'd been wanting to do this. But they'd been unable to get any momentum going. They didn't have the base. They didn't have the fundraising base. So when the property went up for sale, $1.7 million, the Friends of Science East went to New York State for the funding, and they received a promise of a matching grant commitment of $850,000. So they're halfway there. But they'd never been able to raise anything like $850,000 to raise matching money of that kind. And this is where I'm introducing a new concept. This is the concept of the maximizer. Georgetown University coined this term, the maximizer, and this is how they defined it. Maximizers are a relatively rare breed, but if you have a maximizer in your midst, you'll know it and appreciate it. Maximizers, there we go. Maximizers go all out to support the causes they care about, online, offline, and everything in between. So enter the Tesla Maximizer. And the Tesla Maximizer was a man named Matthew Inman. He's the creator of the Oatmeal, which is a very popular cartoon website, very popular on Facebook, trendy, younger audience. And Inman was, he was just plain colorful in his direct, I keep on doing.
I think one more click on these pages.
There we go. There we go. Well, what I was saying, Inman was colorful in his direct approach to how to raise money for the Friends of, who were they at that time? They were the Friends of Science East. See, they've changed the name since. Now they're the Tesla Science Center at Wardenclyffe is their new name. And what Inman and the Friends of Science East did was they put the campaign on Indiegogo back in August 2012. 9 days after they put it on Indiegogo, they reached their goal. They reached that $850,000 goal. And by the end of the month-long campaign, they had raised nearly $1.4 million through crowdfunding. It's one of the great crowdfunding success stories. But not exactly a story about collections care, and that's kind of our challenge within the collections care community, is to transfer this level of success. Really, I'd be happy with a couple of $5,000, $10,000 successes, but we want to transfer this type of success over to the area of collections care funding. Is that possible? Nobody knows for sure, but that's what we're looking at. That's what we're thinking about, trying to figure out how you go about doing that. Closely related to crowdfunding, there's the activity called blogathons that are sometimes used for fundraising. Not always, but sometimes blogathons are used for fundraising. While crowdfunding is led by the institution, blogathons offer a spontaneous gift from outside. They aren't run by the people at the institution. They're launched by the fans of what the institution does. So I've personally participated in 2 of these so far and had great fun with them. And I keep on having trouble with these. There I am. This is one that I participated in. It was in February 2011. I participated in the Film Preservation Blogathon for the Love of Film, and they added the noir to the end of it that year because we were doing a film noir film. So this was hosted by Ferdion Films and the self-styled Siren, and for 1 week in February, approximately 40 bloggers joined together to raise money to conserve a 1950 film noir called The Sound of Fury that starred Lloyd Bridges. That was Lloyd Bridges around 10 years or so before Sea Hunt. And for that blogathon, we were fortunate enough to tap one of the most powerful maximizers in the country, the late Roger Ebert, who tweeted us and blogged us. And we're just so grateful for the help that he gave us in making that campaign a success. He helped offer some of the perks that we were able to offer to people who gave. The prizes used as incentives for giving, the kind of crowdfunding equivalent of the PBS tote bag. So I was involved with that through 2 of my blogs. I had June in Art, which was a short-term blog that where I posted the love letters of my parents from 1949 to 1951. My sister and I had discovered them after their deaths, and it's a sweet little blog. So I put that up there, and for the blogathon, I spent 1 week writing about the movies that they would have seen from 1949 to 1951. And for the other blog, which is complementary to the June and Art blog, I had Preserving a Family Collection, another short-term blog that I did. And I spent that week blogging about film preservation. With each blog would, of course, have the donor button. And if you click on the donor button, and I have all the text there saying, please click on the donor button, it takes you directly to the Film Noir Foundation where you can make your contribution in support of the blogathon. And that was successful in raising about $5,000, enough to complete the restoration of the film, which was premiered at a film festival in San Francisco just last year, the restored version of it. So we did that again. That was what we did in 2011 with our film preservation blogathon. But we returned again in 2012 for another one where we turned to the legacy of Alfred Hitchcock and there was a 40-minute fragment to The White Shadow. It was a lost 1923 silent movie, one of the first things that Alfred Hitchcock ever worked on. It was discovered in a cache of film down in New Zealand. Hitchcock wasn't the director. He worked on it in all other capacities as a set designer, assistant director, screenwriter. And the National Film Preservation Foundation had conserved the film at this time, but they had never made it accessible. They needed funding to add a musical score and to prepare it for live streaming on the internet. And so we just went to it and had great fun blogging about Alfred Hitchcock and promoting Alfred Hitchcock. And I contributed with my own, with my personal blog, 21 essays, where I did 6 essays on black male from 1929, and you just click on that Donate for the Love of Film button, and that would take you to the National Film Preservation Foundation, one click, and takes you to their contribution page. And with that, we raised $15,000 in a week, thanks in part to a generous corporate contribution. As I said, working the outside possibility, working the outside, people outside the crowdfunding campaign is very helpful as well, looking for those corporate contributions to keep the momentum going. And the movie was, we succeeded in raising enough for the musical score and the live streaming, and it was live streamed on the National Film Foundation website, just as promised this past year. So what works in crowdfunding? Establish social media presence. You have to invest in that in advance. You have to build up your Facebook and Twitter audiences. You need to build audiences, communities, friends, all those likes. For your campaign, you probably will need the video. You probably will need something to the equivalent of the Save the Wig video. They aren't that expensive anymore. Video can be fairly cheap to do. And the video really just has to capture the passion or the Save the Wig emotion. And creative perks are important too. They're definitely a strong part of the scene at Kickstarter and Indiegogo. Other nonprofits like the Smithsonian and even our top 10, we've chosen not to go that route because it does muddy the water as far as tax implications go. You have to start figuring out how much of the actual donation can be considered deductible. So you can choose whether you're going the perks route or not, but if you do go Kickstarter or Indiegogo, I think they just expect you to be coming up with some perks. So here are some of the low-end Tesla perks. I mean, the low end, you really don't get very much for $3. But then they go on up to the very high end where, they did get 16 $2,500 contributions. So, yeah, they were getting contributions on the high level as well as the low level. They were getting all across the board on the Tesla campaign. The museum consultant, Linda Norris, she writes a Uncatalogued Museum, great museum blog, and she's very social media savvy with these things. She did her own personal project for studying Ukrainian foodways, and she succeeded in raising $6,000 on Kickstarter. It was as a perk, though. I liked her perks. As a perk, she offered to come to your house and cook a full-course Ukrainian meal for your family for a $2,000 donation. So getting creative, I don't think she had any takers on that, but it just caught people's attention, and she was successful in raising the full amount that she went for. Urgency works on the internet. Fast, punchy campaigns are the best. Where you can raise $850,000 in 9 days, that's what you want to see. You want the stars to align. You want to do it fast. Matching funds are also great. A lot of the things that have been working long-term on PBS and National Public Radio stations tend to work in crowdfunding as well. They've been offering perks for years, and they've also had the type of matching funds where we have this family that's putting up $500 and we'll match your money if you call within the next hour. So that type of thing works on crowdfunding just the way you've heard it work for so many years on public radio. So take advantage of matching funds as well, and just look for those maximizers in your community. If you can get one on your board, go for it. These are not necessarily the young people. I mean, Roger Ebert was not a young person, but they're people who are tuned into the new technology. I'll take a little break, a little breath here, and ask Jenny if there are any questions that have come in, especially on the crowdfunding side.
Yeah, we have a couple questions about crowdfunding. The first one, I'm actually just curious. We have a few folks from Canada and other folks outside the U.S. Are some of the crowdfunding websites you mentioned, are they also international? Is it U.S. only, or?
I think that
My assumption was that they were global.
I'm thinking they're global.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there also are sites that are coming up much more country. I mean, the crowdfunding is going in two different directions. It's going both regional, subject-driven, and the giant behemoths like Kickstarter, where money's coming from all over the place. I mean, yes, there have definitely been Kickstarter campaigns, Canada, England. Yeah, absolutely. They've been, but but there are regional ones that are coming up as well. So it's really good to take a look into what looks best for your type of campaign. If your campaign is going to be more subject-driven, or if it's going to have more of a regional bias, and that should be part of your choice in choosing a platform.
Okay, and then Ronnie just weighed in. It looks like Kickstarter has just recently opened up to
It's
Canada.
just in Canada. Okay.
So I have another question from Lisa in California. She's curious, is it off-putting to some donors that a percentage of their donation benefits that crowdfunding company? Have you found that in your experience that that's an issue at all?
I'm trying to think through, because this is actually something that we're looking at very much with our 10 with our campaign for the 10 endangered artifacts in Pennsylvania. We set it up so that we can allow an organization to have major donors contribute directly to the organization and have it count towards their campaign, but it's not being run through the system. The system at the moment for processing the money takes 2.9% plus a percentage off of every contribution. So it's not a huge amount. It really isn't. I mean, it's not like 10% or anything like that of every funding goes to the internet processors, but 3 to 4%, yes, of each contribution is going. And if you have a person who's interested in giving $1,000 or more, it starts adding up, and they might have real concerns that that's not the best way of going. They can just call up the institution and give the money directly to them. Why not do that? And all the money will go to the project that they want to support. So when we designed our platform, we made sure that we could enter that type of donation that goes directly to the institution and to the overall competition, and it would count towards the goal that they were trying to raise. You can't do that on Kickstarter. You can't do that on Indiegogo. You can't do that on many of the large platforms. But I think you can do that when you're the Smithsonian Institution and you're running it off your own website. It's a real argument for running it off your own website. On the other hand, you don't get the traffic on your website that you really are thinking of possibly capitalizing on when you go for a Kickstarter. So you have to look at all the different, all the pluses and minuses of the various platforms, which one will work best for you. Is it a concern? It's absolutely a concern that major donors would be concerned about the processing fees on something like this.
Okay, and let's see, we have another question from Emily, and we've gotten a lot of these in this series about just how do I convince, the decision-making folks that this is a good idea. So her question is, do you have any ideas of convincing arguments in favor of implementing these online fundraising options? Emily says that people in the decision-making positions might just reject something like this out of hand, since you don't always end up getting 100% of that gift.
Well, we were just discussing about the 100% problem. For how to convince people that crowdfunding is the way to go, I would say if you haven't invested in order to do this type of project, you have to invest in building your social media community well in advance. You just don't jump right into any of these things. So if you're thinking of doing this type of campaign 2 or 3 years down the road, this is the time now in order to start building up your social media communities. So at the moment, you should be looking long-term at fundraising and what kind of mix you're thinking of doing in fundraising over the next 5 years. And if that's the case, you should start invest in building up that type of thing now. I really think that this type of thing, see, now it's my left brain side kicking in here where I'm saying you should approach this very strategically. I would actually I would build up the social media and I would try to convince them to do an experimental project to raise maybe $1,500 to $2,500 through one of these sites and see if it works for you or not. In other words, not that much is being risked by it, and it's a special project, and let's see if it works or not. Not the $125,000 project of a Smithsonian institution. Does that help at all?
Yeah, a great way to kind of get started, just to gauge whether this is going to be successful for them in the future. I think that's a great response. Let me throw one more question your way, Lee. So we had a question. Coming out of Salt Lake City, Utah, a statewide community foundation has started hosting an annual Day of Giving where nonprofits can participate to whatever degree they're inclined. Our person is curious if these are becoming more popular across the country. Have you heard of these happening in other states?
Which state was that? Who was doing that one?
Utah.
Oh yeah, Utah had a successful one, I think, didn't they? Is that what you just said? Yeah, Utah's had a successful one. Kentucky had a very successful one. Kentucky, they raised $300,000 on a community day of giving, a 24-hour fundraising marathon. And for this type of thing, they generally, so Utah's done it, Kentucky's done it, I think Omaha, Nebraska, I think that they had a successful one of these. And other ones are doing these too. Usually it's a community foundation or regional or state foundation that does this type of project. I'm not sure who was leading it in Utah. They say in Kentucky they raised $300,000, but the most that any one single institution got out of that was around 15,000. They had at least 300 nonprofits in there for that 24-hour day of giving, and the Kentucky Historical Society did pretty well with that. They raised over $3,000. They were one of the top ones. So if you hear about a community day of giving, I would say pitch in and definitely see if you can make a difference. If you hear about something like that, go for it. It's a fantastic opportunity, and it's also a fantastic opportunity to get an idea of how good your social media communities are out there. There's also that Giving Tuesday idea that's going around. There's the website for Giving Tuesday or hashtag Giving Tuesday, where they're proposing that there be a national day of giving to lead off the holiday season. So you go from Black Friday to Cyber Monday, and then you have a national Giving Tuesday. And I don't know, sounds like a good potential idea. But the regional ones that community foundations are doing are fantastic, or organizations can do their own 24-hour community fundraising. Just set up your own opportunity, especially if you can make it, if you can tie in a 24-hour fundraising with some important date within your organization, some anniversary of an object, a birthday of somebody, some historic figure associated with an historic site, or an art object or a document. If you can tie that in with that, then you have the opportunity to get a lot of media coverage because you have that sense of urgency. Collecting institutions are always looking for hooks that they can establish a sense of urgency with, and you certainly get that with the 24-hour raising. The problem with the 24-hour fundraising is you're competing against some organizations that are very savvy about this type of thing and have a lot of emotional appeal. You're competing against the Special Olympics when you're going in one of these community foundations 24-hour day giving.
Well,
nevertheless, highly recommend them.
well, that sounds like a great segue into your next section, Lee.
I've got internet. Yep, I should move. I should. Okay, internet competitions, and yeah, we're talking about the zero-sum world here, where the winner-take-all competitions. Now, as I said, that's not what we're doing with our PA Top 10, so I'm considering this different. This is very much a corporate-based competition type approach that's been done with Amazon, Pepsi. The Knight Foundation did one of these in collaboration with the National Trust for Historic Preservation. They are kind of winner takes all, or usually the top three winners take most everything. It's a zero-sum pie thing. Like, when Kelsey put her peach pie up there, I'm thinking, yeah, that's the zero-sum pie there, where only so many pieces are available to go around. It's not the infinite pie that you think you're working with, at least when you're working with Kickstarter. So we do have these, and I did want to give a call out for the Aviva Community Fund. This is up in Canada. Aviva Insurance is currently running a contest with the first qualifying round is open right now through October 14th. And I just want to make a call out here for Heritage Park Historical Village in Fort McMurray near Calgary, because they're the historic site who's in there pushing for this. They had some really devastating funding, and they're really hoping that they can pull through with this campaign to raise some money to recover from that. So this is something to Google. I don't have the URL up there, but this is a competition that's going on right now. You can see how it's based on a sports model. I mean, it's a qualifying round. It's like, a boxing match or an Olympics competition, and there will be winners or losers at the end. This is just how this type of thing works. Website donor buttons. We had a question back at the very first webinar from Salt Lake City, I think, about the usefulness of giving tabs on websites, and I did definitely want to get to that question. I thought it was a great question. With questions like this, I frequently look at the really successful fundraisers and see if they do it or not. So here's the New York Public Library. Do they have donor buttons? And yeah, sure, they use donor buttons, and very successfully. But I tend to recommend that website giving tabs like this, I say, yeah, definitely put them up, but don't expect them to be all that effective. I recommend them more as a reminder that your organization is an active nonprofit and that you welcome support. From a fundraising perspective, it just says that you're open for business. But just to show their effectiveness at this type of thing, here's what's underneath that on the New York Public Library's website currently. A specific short-term fundraising give now. Your gift matched until September 30th. There's urgency there. This is the type of campaign that really is so much more successful in getting clicks than the support the library or the donate tabs. I don't think they're in competition there. I think they're doing it exactly right, that they should have the support the library and donate tabs should be there for the long-term fundraising. But down below, they're going for that short-term campaign, and my guess is they'll be very successful with it. Mobile giving is hot and getting hotter. That's where you give through your smartphone, and where you can just spontaneously give $10 as you stroll through the museum. You'll be inspired. They'll have the information up there on where to go and in order to give the money. Or you can just do it on your commute home when you're linking to something. It's very important these days, if you're doing any type of fundraising, even with the crowdfunding models, to make sure that it all looks good on mobile and that you can get to the ability to send the money easily through this type of system. You don't want it looking too small there, where you see new text message, thank you for your donation. You want it to be very, very visible. The number that you have to enter should be just, you shouldn't be squinting at the screen in order to have to see it. adopt an item. I said I wanted to go into that just a little bit because now we're off the digital side and we're into the non-digital possibilities. With adopt and object programs, the choice of what receives priority treatment is kind of taken out of the hands of the library curator. They can point you in the right direction, but the potential donor holds the reins and say that they're giving money, um, and it's really sort of headed towards this particular object. This works really well with small groups of enthusiasts. Like Kelsey mentioned, affinity groups. They're perfect for this, where you have, the friends of the library within the larger museum, or the friends of the library within the university. This is very effective for that, and that's, Bryn Mawr College is definitely, Bryn Mawr College Library Special Collections is working that type of a system where they have sponsor a book or an Asian scroll. The minimum amount is $1,000, and this has worked. They've been very successful. They offer opportunities for adopt a book, and they also proudly say which books have been adopted. They make, for the person who has everything, this is a great opportunity for a gift for the holiday season or a birthday. If you have something really stupendous, if you have the double elephant folio of the Birds of America or something, I would ask for more than 1,000. That's the low end for this type of privilege. But if you have affinity groups, I would push this type of thing. I think it's a great idea. Other opportunities with promotional sponsorships, I did want to mention about a fun one that we had up here. That was when we were working with the Lutheran Archives Center here in Philadelphia, and they were trying to raise the match for the Save America's Treasures grant to conserve the Muhlenberg journals. Two of the board members raised contributions by paddling down some of the rivers that Muhlenberg would have traveled, and that really did was it raised funds, all right, per mile donations, but it really raised media awareness. It got them on television. Special events are fairly common in our world, but most of them are big gala events for operating funds. In recent years, more small, intimate type of special events have become more popular, and I like them a lot. I'm not a big fan of the huge gala events. I think an intimate dinner at the board president's house for a select group of people who are really interested in the subject, you actually have more of an opportunity to say how much you need to raise and to make the direct ask at these opportunities. If you can get a minor celebrity, an author or something present or something, then it can work some magic. And never underestimate the magic involved with a behind-the-scenes tour for a small group of people, especially when you can put them in proximity to the historic item. That's just it's a moment of privilege, and moments of privilege are about the best possible fundraising device. Setting up opportunities for those moments of privilege are setting up the opportunity for making the major donor ask. So capitalize on other things too. Capitalize on those anniversaries of creations, anniversaries of birth dates. Know what's going on in the world, the book and film and TV tie-ins, and be ready to take advantage of them. Well, these ideas, they are sort of random, intuitive. They're the right brain ideas. They don't tend to be as strategic. I have a hunch that the 10 items competing in Pennsylvania's top 10 were not in the strategic plans of these organizations as the objects that need treatment. As something that they really have to address within the next 5 years. But nevertheless, in this case, they were responsive. It wasn't so much strategic. They went for it. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. Just leave the opportunity in your strategic plan to go for these right brain opportunities when they arise. Make sure you cover operating funds when you do it. Don't underestimate your own time and include them in the budget, the amount of money that you want to raise. And invest now in both learning the new technologies, mastering them, and also in building the social media communities, because you're falling behind the ball if you're not doing it now. People should be able to spend time on Facebook building up your website, building up their communities in that way, because I think it will pay off in these new fundraising strategies that are definitely emerging. That's what I've got, Jenny, and more questions coming in?
Yeah, we have a couple questions. Let me pull over our final homework assignment. Again, this is just the evaluation for the course. It is required if you want to earn that certificate, but if you weren't interested in the certificate, we'd still love for you to fill it out. We'd love to hear your feedback if you've been following along. I'm also going to go ahead and pull over the group attendance. So this is for folks who one person logged in, but a lot of people are watching and are interested in earning a certificate. If the person who is closest to the keyboard could just go ahead and type in the names of your group members, and if you did log in, we got you. So don't worry, you don't need to fill this out. All right, Lee. Let's see. So we have a question out of Colorado about website campaigns. So on the website, she's curious, can short-term campaigns also be about a specific project? So for example, your example was given for matching funds, but she's curious, could you also advertise, for example, we need a certain amount in order to purchase special boxes for a collection?
I would definitely be looking for the hook, the story that's going to be really exciting to come out of this, because rehousing that doesn't really fall into the the question is, what are you rehousing? What is this long-term preservation of what object or what objects? And it's the stories around those artifacts that you're going to be selling in your fundraising strategy. We're just always looking for those exciting stories. And if that's part of the fun of doing fundraising, is trying to figure out what the stories behind these artifacts are and how best to communicate them to our audiences. Because the object isn't to preserve, isn't to buy the box or to rehouse. The object is to preserve the artifact.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And another question from Leslie, who's curious about adopt an object campaigns. And I posted a link to a webinar we had done just on this topic. But she's curious, in your experience, Lee, what have you seen? If somebody adopts a book, what are they given in return other than recognition? Are they given any objects, or what have you seen in other programs like that?
Basically, they're given a book plate. It goes in the book. I think that's how it works, at least. Now I'm wondering if I think that's the usual one. A very non-invasive, can easily be removed book plate without any damage to the book. Long term, that. Say if you. I'm thinking of the University of Pennsylvania Museum and what they have, University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology here, where they have this giant ball that they're looking for a sponsor for. I looked for a photo that I could put up on the website. I thought that would be really fun. It looks a giant transparent piece of glass, giant marble type thing, and they want a large sponsorship amount for it. But I imagine if you gave that, you'd get your name on the platform there. I would think that for the large contribution that they're asking for the sponsorship, it's sort of like a corporate contribution where you get your name up there associated with the object. I think that's the main thing you get. I just thought it was a neat thing to. I can't afford to do it, but in order to give that type of a gift to somebody that you've sponsored this book, I've done that with like animals, sponsor a whale thing and given that as a present, and you get regular emails from the institution about the work of the institution, but it's all basically you get on the membership list so they can ask you for more money. People understand that. It's okay. You've shown an interest in the organization, and it's just considered a neat way of making a very personal gift.
And we had Alana who weighed in. She said they have an Adopt a Glacier program at her institute, and their folks receive an email, a high-res digital image of their glacier, a certificate with their name on it, and a fact sheet about that glacier along with a thank you letter. So sounds like there's all sorts of things you could do. I guess understanding your audience is the key.
Elena, please put the URL up there too. So I'll even go to that. I think that'd be really neat to adopt a glacier. I would do that.
Great. So we've got 4 minutes. So if anyone has any last remaining questions, feel free to post them in. Again, this is our last webinar for this course. We've loved seeing you all on here and working with you. And if you are interested in our next course, it's Caring for Audio-Visual Material. If you haven't registered, registration does close on Wednesday, so make sure to do that. And I do just want to note personally, those donate buttons on the websites, you might not get a lot of activity on them, but I was recently looking for a shelter, a Humane Society shelter in Philadelphia, to make a donation in honor of a lost pet. And, I picked the one that had the easiest to locate donate button, so definitely important to have. All right, guys. Well, it looks like we don't have any questions. Thank you guys so much for joining us and keeping along through all of these 5 webinars. We hope you've found them useful and they've gotten you to start thinking about how to fundraise for your institution. And Lee, thank you so much for helping us think outside the box today.
Okay, and if anybody wants to put questions, up on the site, I'll take a look at them for answering in print.
Yep.
On the site.
Yep, if folks have any remaining questions that you think of even later after the fact, feel free to send us the questions, info@heritagepreservation.org, and we'll send them along to Lee. So have a fantastic afternoon. Thank you, everyone.